first of all, there's a need for this. So, I'm seeing a lot of clients in the marketplace who are keen to explore the possibility of nearshoring and really think about what does it mean for my business. How can I leverage nearshoring as a key strategy, as part of a broader shared services and outsourcing strategy, but nearshoring is a key component of that. So I think first of all there's a client need. Secondly, I think there's been some challenges in recent months and years around the business case for globalization. I think there is a increasingly strong business case for companies to regionalize as opposed to just globalize. So the costs and benefits of globalization can be quite high, but sometimes it's easier to start with a regional model rather than a global model. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations think through that now. And I think regionalization is a key thing that's going on in the markets, and nearshoring speaks very closely to that, where you get some of the benefits of being perhaps a bit closer to your customer than you were before, but without some of the challenges that pushing work out to Asia, for example, can offer. And then I think finally it's about the market. The market is innovative. The providers are looking at lots of different ways to really expand their service lines, and also the providers are countries as well. So most of the countries in the Americas are actively pursuing investment and business opportunities in the US and Canada, and I think there's just a huge amount of innovation in the market which an intelligent buyer can really tap to their own benefits and really make a difference in terms of changing the way you run the business and the way you operate the business. Often these are very similar to outsourcing concerns. So, loss of control is always a key thing that people worry about. In some industries, particularly regulated industries, big security concerns about data privacy and data protection in Europe. I think also there's concerns about the challenges of switching from, perhaps the status quo. So fear of change, or the willingness or ability of the organisation to switch away from its current setup. Most companies have a set of existing providers, or whether they're internal providers or external providers, and just switching away from those incurs cost and risk and change that a lot of organisations are not necessarily willing to bear without a really good business case. And I think that's perhaps the last piece I'll comment on, is that sometimes the business case is not well understood. So there's a misconception that perhaps the business case is not as strong as it really is. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of client discussion at several levels. So one level is, what does the portfolio look like? So the portfolio of what should be done in-house versus outsourced, what should be done in-country versus nearshored versus offshored. We hear the term right-shored. Mm-hmm. So there's some very big questions around what does the portfolio look like, and I think the answer is often that it is a portfolio. So there's often a set of choices. It's not just about one country or one region or even one mode of operation. It's a combination of having in-house, outsourced. Captives, of course, are still being used quite a lot. A captive being an in-house version, which is perhaps in one of these countries, so within the corporation, but in a different country. And I think the other big topic is, the fundamental question of what services do we need to be nearshored, what cost are we willing to pay, what risk are we willing to bear, and how do we make it work? So these are some of the big questions that clients are always talking about. One of the things we try and steer them away from a little is what country to go in, because to some degree the country choice, whilst important, is secondary in the sense that if you understand what services and functions you want at the cost and risk you're willing to pay, the service provider often can manage to the outcome that you're looking for, and how they do it is to some degree part of their responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that you don't know where your services are being located, but 4 or 5 years ago we saw a lot of focus around clients doing location analyses and trying to choose which country to go to. I think the market has matured a lot since then, and now if you go to one of the established service providers, you can almost have a choice of countries through that service provider, and the service provider will manage that risk, the country level risk, rather than you having to do it yourself, which I think is a change over the last few years. Yeah, so risks and rewards are well-established concepts. I mean, nearshoring has a lot of risks involved, or can do, and often the risks are all the way through the process, from the strategy stage, all the way through the deal formulation stage. Transition is a particularly risky time, but also when the operations are in steady states. So it's on the risk side, I think it's important that organisations have a robust capability to understand and manage those risks, not just mitigating the risks themselves, but also pushing the risks to the providers to manage as well. So the concept of risk sharing. Now, of course, on the other side of the coin is the rewards, and this is often the thing that everybody gets really focused on, is how much money am I going to save by nearshoring? And that's absolutely a key driver. People will save money from nearshoring in many cases, but it's not just about saving the short-term dollars. Often we see cases where providers, perhaps over the longer term, don't offer the kind of value that they offered when they originally did the deal up front. So I think it's very important that buyers, who are the primary audience for this white paper, think about the whole life cycle of the nearshoring and the outsourcing. If you look on nearshoring and outsourcing as a 1-year transaction, for example, we've seen many cases where clients have been disappointed by that. Whereas if you look on it as a 3 to 5 year organisational change, as opposed to just a transaction, those are the clients that generally get more value out of outsourcing and nearshoring, because they can take a multi-year perspective. They recognise that the provider has upfront costs which need to be covered over time, and the incentives can be put in place so that you've got the right customer incentives and the right service provider incentives. And fundamentally, Kirk, I think that's a lot of the challenge is around the performance management framework that exists. How is performance managed to ensure that the customer gets the services they want at the best quality, at the best price and cost, and at the most appropriate risk, in a way that the service provider feels allows them to make a decent return on their investment, because they have to earn a fair margin as well.